Hello and welcome to the Sally Tomato YouTube channel. I'm Kate, and here at Sally Tomato we bring you tutorials that educate, inspire, and help you create confidently. Today we're making the Harriet bag. The subtle shape creates a roomy interior and classic silhouette, and there's unique yet simple to install hardware. The front slip pocket echoes the bag's shaped top edge. The pattern allows for the choice between a shoulder strap or adjustable strap. This bag pairs beautifully with any of our Sally Tomato wallet patterns like the Bella or Lucky Penny, and it's a fashionable addition to your handmade bag collection. All the patterns can be found at sallytomato.com. The finished size is 9.5 inches wide, 9.5 inches tall, and 4.5 inches deep. The Harriet bag features a magnetic snap closure, front slip pocket, shoulder strap, grommet accents, shaped bottom. Inside you'll find interior slip pocket and zipper pocket, and you always have the option to add bag feet and a tassel. Before we get started, make sure you have a pattern. See the description below this video to follow the link to access all the pattern information. All the supplies you need are listed on the back of the pattern. This project is suitable for a wide variety of fabrics, so have fun selecting them. You become the designer. Once you decide on your fabrics, gather your supplies along with your pattern, then cut out all the necessary pieces following your pattern, and let's begin. Follow the pattern for all the recommended seam allowances and stitch lengths. And before we get started, I'd like to take just a minute to give you a few tips for selecting the interfacing and the foam or fleece. It all depends on the fabrics that you select. If you have a lightweight fabric, you may prefer to use a foam or air mesh as the stabilizer or base support for your bag. If you're using cork or full leather, I'm using a combination of two different colors of cork. You may opt to use a lighter weight fleece or no fleece at all. The design of this bag has the exterior seams at the center front and center back, while the interior seams are at the sides. This is going to distribute the bulk of the seam allowances, making it a little easier in the final assembly, but this is also where we need to take into account our fleece or foam or air mesh if we're using those as stabilizing or support for the bag. When you're selecting the foam or fleece or air mesh, be aware of the thickness of the layers for the grommet connectors. I'm using as light a weight interfacing, such as fleece in this case, to keep the thickness of those layers to a minimum. I've already gone ahead and cut out my main fabric, contrast fabric, lining, and interfacing. I've also cut out fleece. I'm going to use fleece with my cork fabrics. They're a little lighter weight than a faux leather, but you certainly could choose to skip the fleece entirely using cork or faux leather fabrics. And then I have my heavy stabilizer, which is going to help stabilize the base. For my lining fabric, I've selected our Sally Tomato Turtle Tex, which is coated. I don't even need to use the interfacing because the coating acts as an interfacing on this fabric. Our first step is to fuse the interfacing to the coordinating pieces, but as I mentioned before, I'm going to skip this step because I'm using Turtle Tex, which already has a coating that acts as an interfacing. You'll center and fuse one interfacing piece to the wrong side of each coordinating lining piece, B and G. An optional step is to fuse interfacing to the contrast fabric piece C facings. I'm not going to use interfacing here because I have a cork fabric that does not need interfacing. Now we're going to attach the heavy stabilizer. Center the stabilizer piece J on the wrong side of your foam or fleece piece B, that's the base. You can certainly use a very minimal amount of temporary adhesive spray, or 2 or 3 very small pieces of double-sided basting tape can certainly work. A quick tip on using the basting tape: if you find that the paper release does not release very easily, simply rub the tape with your finger. The warmth of your finger is going to activate the adhesive of the tape. It will stick a little better to the fabric, and you should be able to pull the paper release away very easily. Now top stitch an 1/8 inch from the edge of your piece J. That's the heavy stabilizer. With right sides up, center each main fabric piece A over a coordinating foam or fleece piece A, aligning all the edges. Hold the edges in place with sewing clips, and then at the machine we'll baste an 1/8 inch from each edge of each piece A. We're going to repeat the steps to attach the contrast fabric, piece B, that's our base, to the fleece or foam. Now at the machine, we're going to top stitch a 1/2 inch from the edge. This is going to give a top stitch detail to the base of the bag. We're ready to begin shaping pieces. On the wrong side of main piece A exterior, mark the center along the short top and bottom edges. Make sure you double check your measurements. These pieces are almost square, so you need to make sure that the shortest edges are the top and bottom edges. You'll also mark in from each top corner along the top short edge, and then draw an angled line from each mark to the adjacent bottom corner, just like I've done here. Now center the exterior shaping template A that's found in your pattern at the top center mark and aligned to the drawn angled side lines. You'll trace the curved top edge of the template and then flip the template over and mark the remaining half of the top edge. You'll notice in the pattern we recommend marking on the wrong sides of our pieces. However, I'm using fleece on the wrong side of my main exterior fabric, which is a little challenging to mark on. So I'm carefully marking on the right side of my exterior using an erasable pen. Now at the machine, you'll baste an 1/8 inch inside each marked line. And then cut along all the marked lines, just as I've done here. You'll also mark angled side edges on your lining piece G for the interior pieces. Again, measuring in from the top corners, and then simply cut both angled lines. And our last piece to shape is on the wrong side of the contrast fabric piece E, that's the exterior pocket. Mark the center at the top and bottom long edges, and then center the pocket curve template B, also found in your pattern, at the top edge, aligning the straight edges. Trace the curved edge of the template. You may find it helpful to mark the center along the curved line. Make sure to mark on the wrong side so this mark doesn't show. And then cut along the marked line. You can install a handmade label centered and up from the bottom edge. Be sure to visit our YouTube channel to watch a helpful video tutorial for installing this hardware. Now we're ready to prepare the base and install optional bag feet. Transfer the side and end center marks from the base pattern piece onto the wrong side of your exterior base, piece B. Adding bag feet is optional. Transfer the bag feet placement from the pattern piece J and install the hardware on the right side of the base, just like I've done here. For helpful tips on installing the bag feet, be sure to visit our YouTube channel. Top stitch the top shaped edge of the contrast fabric, piece E, that's your exterior pocket, with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. We'll set the pocket aside for just a moment, and with right sides together, align all the edges of the main fabric pieces A, that's your exterior. Hold the layers together with sewing clips, and then sew a 3/8 inch seam allowance along one side edge. Press the seam open using a seam roller or your fingers, and if your fabric can be pressed with a hot iron, you may certainly use an iron for this step. Now on the right side, top stitch an 1/8 inch from each side of this one seam. Now we're going to bring that pocket back, and with right sides up, center the exterior pocket over the seam and up from the bottom edge. And this is where the Sew Tight magnets come in handy. They can hold that pocket in place as you top stitch. You'll top stitch an 1/8 inch from the sides and bottom edge of the pocket. We're ready to assemble the bag exterior. With right sides together, align the remaining side edges of your main fabric piece A exterior. Hold the layers together and sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance along that side edge. Again, press the seam open. And then on the right side, top stitch an 1/8 inch from each side of the seam if desired. Now this will be the back of the bag, so if you prefer to not top stitch, that's just fine. But if you do want to top stitch, take your time as you sew. You may find it helpful to roll the exterior out of the way as you sew. With right sides together, fold the exterior in half, matching the center seams and aligning the raw edges. And now match each exterior center seam to a marking along the long edge of your contrast base. And this would be right sides together. Match each exterior side mark to the mark at the curved end of the base, aligning the raw edges. Be sure to use lots of sewing clips to hold these layers together. And then if you need to, you can snip very tiny snips, no more than an 1/8 inch, into the straight edge of the exterior along the areas of the curved ends to help relax those straight edges of the fabric. Now at the sewing machine, sew together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I find it easiest to begin sewing along a longer, straighter edge of the base, and then sew into the tighter curve. We're using a narrower seam allowance along the base because it creates less bulk. After sewing, trim the excess foam or fleece from the seam allowance if you wish, and then leave the exterior wrong side out. We're ready to move on to the lining, and the first thing we're going to do is create the interior slip pocket. I've already gone ahead and assembled my slip pocket, and then I did attach it to one lining piece G. So refer to the pattern instructions for all the details, and you can certainly visit our YouTube channel for a helpful slip pocket tutorial. You may notice I have 2 rows of top stitching along the top edge of my pocket, and this is a great tip from our sample sewist, Jen. She always top stitches 2 rows along the top edge. That way when she's positioning a pocket, she always knows which side is the top. The next pocket is the interior zipper pocket. Again, I've gone ahead and created the zipper pocket. Follow the instructions in the pattern for all the measurements and details, and then refer to a helpful video tutorial that we have on our YouTube channel. We're ready to attach the facings to the lining. A quick note, you may find it really helpful in following steps to mark the center with a line on the wrong side of your facing pieces. With right sides together, align one long straight edge of one contrast fabric piece C, one of the facing pieces, with the top long edge of a lining piece G. You'll sew these layers together with 3/8 inch seam allowance. And then press the lining away from the facing. Top stitch on the right side of the lining 1/8 inch from the seam. Also, on the right side, install 1/2 of the magnetic snap centered and up from the seam on each facing. And I've gone ahead and assembled one facing and lining piece. I find it helpful to add a small scrap of foam under the washer to help cushion the magnetic snap. And be sure to check out our YouTube channel for a helpful video tutorial. Now we're ready to assemble the interior. With right sides together, align the side and bottom edges of the interior panels. Then sew the side seams with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. A great idea is to stop here and test the fit by slipping the interior inside the exterior bag and then matching the center front marks to the center front seams. Now's the time, if needed, you can adjust the depth of the interior seams for a perfect fit. After test fitting, trim the seam allowances to a 1/4 inch width. and then press the seam allowance open using a seam roller, your fingers, or if your fabric can be pressed, you can certainly use an iron. Now this next step is optional, but you may find it really helpful because it holds the facing seams. Top stitch an 1/8 inch from each side of the facing seams, pivoting over the top stitching on the lining fabric. Now with right sides together, fold the interior in half, matching the side seams and aligning the raw edges. Mark the center folds at the top and bottom edges. With right sides together, match each interior side seam with a marking at the curved end of the lining fabric piece B, that's the base piece. Match each interior center mark to the mark on the long edge of the base, aligning the raw edges. Again, use lots of sewing clips to hold those layers together, this time snipping no more than 1/4 inch into the edge of this interior along the tight curved ends to help relax the straight edge of the fabric. At the sewing machine, we're going to sew this seam together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then trim the allowance to 1/4 inch wide. And turn the interior, the lining, right side out. Now we can begin assembling the bag. Slip the interior into the exterior, aligning the curved top edges and the center marks to the seams. Sew the top edge together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. The narrower seam allowance is going to allow all these curves to lay a little more smoothly. There'll be less bulk. If you find as you're sewing the facing curve doesn't quite match the exterior bag curve, follow the exterior bag curve all the way around. The facing can always be trimmed a little bit. And then cut small notches into the tight, curved top seam allowance. and snip into the lower broad curved seam allowance without cutting into any seam stitches. Cutting these notches and little snips in the seam allowance is going to help keep the contoured top edge of the bag smooth. Now turn the bag right side out through the opening in the interior zipper pocket. Turn the raw edges of the opening in the zipper pocket with wrong sides together so the folds are even. Top stitch the opening closed with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Smooth the interior down into the bag and then roll the top seam edge, pressing it with your fingers. I'm actually going to turn my bag with the exterior to the inside just to make it a little easier for me to top stitch around the topmost edge of the bag so that my right side of stitching is on the right side of the exterior. If your machine has a free arm, certainly you can stitch much more easily. Top stitch the top edge with an 1/8 inch or a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Top stitch slowly as you near the magnetic snap area, keeping the stitching line smooth. The magnetic snap may try to latch on to your machine bed or throat plate. Also, if you find the layers are very thick at the seams, you can certainly choose to begin and end the top stitching before the seams. Just make sure your spacing is the same on either side of the seam, so it's very purposeful that you decided to top stitch just a portion of the top edge. Again, you're the designer. You can choose if you wish to top stitch the entire edge. You've done a great job. We're ready to install the grommet strap connectors. Fold the top edge of the bag in half, matching the center seams, and hold those top contoured edges together with sewing clips. Insert one grommet strap connector down from the top edge and then also in from the side fold. Place the right side of the hardware on the front of the bag. And be sure to check out our YouTube channel for a helpful tutorial on installing this unique hardware. One additional tip, we recommend after marking the grommet cutout at the sewing machine, based about an 1/8 inch away from the marked circle, making sure any stitching will not be visible underneath or peeking out from the hardware once it's installed. This basting helps hold all the layers together as you're cutting through those layers to create the opening or the eyelet for the grommet to fit into. Next, we're going to make and attach the shoulder strap. With wrong sides together, fold each long edge of the contrast fabric piece D to the center. Another tip from Jen is to mark a center line between the two long edges. This way, when you're folding those long edges to the center, you have the center exact. At the sewing machine, top stitch each long side 1/4 inch from the fold. Now thread each shoulder strap end through one of the U-rings of the grommet strap connector and fold each strap end about 1 inch to the underside. And top stitch the strap to itself. An optional detail is to install a small Chicago screw or rivet for reinforcement at the strap end. Another option, if you prefer an adjustable strap instead of a simple shoulder strap, be sure to visit our YouTube channel to watch a video tutorial for creating the adjustable strap using your 2 contrast pieces D for the adjustable strap. Another design detail is to make and attach a tassel. Again, we have instructions and tutorial for using this tassel cap hardware on our YouTube channel, and you'll use contrast piece F for your tassel. I hope you enjoyed learning how to make the Harriet bag. Let us know in the comments if you have any other questions or suggestions for this pattern. Please share and show off your photos of your completed project. We'd love to see your style. Use the hashtags Sally Tomato and Harriet Bag on social media so we can see it. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. That way you won't miss out on any future tutorials. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll check out the rest of our pattern line for more creative projects. Until the next tutorial, have a great making day.